Something I see online a lot as a comic book fan is people asking where to start, what to read, what's important, what's good, and this usually happens when people get interested in a character after an appearance in a movie or a TV show. As you may or may not know, Supergirl has made her first feature film appearance in almost 40 years in the latest DC movie, The Flash, played wonderfully by Sasha Calle. It was also announced earlier in the year by James Gunn that Warner Bros. Will be making a Supergirl movie based on the Woman of Tomorrow comic. Since this announcement, and with the Flash movie, I've seen people online asking for Supergirl recommendations. So I thought it would be fun to do a reading guide / history of Supergirl kind of thing. So I'm going to go through the years and give you an idea of what things are like so that you can decide what you'd like to read or not. Specifically focusing on Kara Zor-El, as that is the Supergirl that is showing up in movies. Supergirl was created by Otto Binder and Al Plastino, debuting in Action Comics number 252, which was published on March 31st, 1959. Prior to writing for DC, Binder had done a lot of work for Fawcett writing the Shazam family, or the original Captain Marvel. There, he created the character Mary Marvel, and Kara was likely an attempt to do a similar thing. So this is the beginning of the character in what is referred to as the Silver Age. The Golden Age begins with the creation of Superman in 1938, while the Silver Age starts with the creation of Barry Allen, the second Flash, in 1956. Supergirl stories were all backups in the pages of Action Comics. Luckily, these have all been collected in 2 omnibuses. The Silver Age is an acquired taste, especially Silver Age DC, which is known for being kinda goofy and utterly insane. Just futzing bananas. If you can get down with that, they're really fun, and a lot of iconic stuff did come from these stories, but I also understand if someone doesn't vibe. If you can get down with the goofy insanity, I'd recommend. Otherwise, I'd say skip. I will also add that a lot of this stuff was a bit of an influence on the TV show starring Melissa Benoist. There's one story in which the villain Mrs. Pitalik tries to force Kara to marry him that was loosely adapted into an episode of the show. And Kara was also best friends with Lena Luthor, which is a major element of the show, though it is different, utterly insane, and also sometimes my favorite stories of this era. In 1969, Supergirl was moved from the backup pages of Action Comics into the headlining feature of Adventure Comics, starting with issue number 381. This is a bit of an awkward era for the character as DC shifts from the Silver Age into the Bronze Age. And I found most of this stuff to be kinda bland and forgettable. But I do think this series turns around a little. Starting in Adventure Comics number 406, Kara leaves college and moves to San Francisco, where she gets a job at a TV station. This last little section of her Adventure Comics days were pretty solid. There were some stories with a bit of variety to them. There was a haunted house one. There was one where alien mermen tried to steal Earth's water. It's all crazy, but there were stakes to them and they were fun. Now this era has not been collected at all, but it is all on the DC Universe app if you're a subscriber to that. After Adventure Comics number 424, it was decided to let Supergirl have her own solo title. This new solo series debuted in 1972, and it is, unfortunately, a bit of a disaster. It kinda starts off on the wrong foot. Adventure Comics number 424 ends with Kara quitting her job, so Supergirl number 1 picks up with her going back to college, this time to study acting. Adventure had established a working supporting cast and status quo by the end, and it gets thrown away in favor of nothing. In this series, Kara does not have consistent friends or roommates. She has a different boyfriend every single issue, despite apparently dating all of them for a while. It's a mess. This series has also not been collected, but again, it is on DC Universe. This is not one I would recommend. It's a pretty rough read, and it was cancelled after 10 issues. Supergirl was then moved into the anthology title Superman Family, alongside Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane. These stories have not been collected, nor are they on DC Universe, so I have not read them outside of one issue I found at my local comic book store. In 1982, Supergirl got another crack at a solo series, this one titled The Daring New Adventures of Supergirl. This is a really exciting series as firstly, it's a really strong creative team with Paul Kupperberg writing, Carmine Infantino on pencils, and Bob Oskner on inks. And secondly, it really does feel like they care about the character and wanted to show how cool she is. In this series, Kara moves to Chicago to attend college, yes, for the 3rd time, to study psychology. A supporting cast is quickly established and consistent, which is already a step above the 1972 series. One of the things I absolutely loved about this series is that it is totally respectful of Supergirl as her own hero. Superman makes a couple appearances towards the end of the series, but the series doesn't rely on him at all. This is Kara's story and Kara's book, and that is respected. He doesn't even really come up that much, and when he does show, there's an equal respect. They're a good team, and it's a lot of fun to see them together. This series also adds a bunch of new villains, really giving Kara a proper rogues gallery. The two most notable of these are Reactron and Psy, both of whom were adapted onto the television show. And Reactron will be a major recurring threat for Kara later. You can genuinely just read this series in a vacuum. This absolutely functions as an introduction to her. The origin is given with a nice focus on the pathos and tragedy of this character. I think this is as solid a starting place as any, and it's good and it's fun. Unfortunately, the series was cancelled after issue number 23, and it does end on a bit of a cliffhanger. The plans to continue were scrapped thanks to Crisis on Infinite Earths. This was a massive crossover event comic that started in 1985. The main goal of this was to streamline DC's continuity and history, effectively rebooting the universe and destroying the multiverse. One of the changes DC felt they needed to make was to get rid of any Kryptonian that wasn't Superman in order to make him feel more special. So Kara was not only killed off during Crisis, but also erased from existence. She never happened, which is really stupid, frankly, but it's what happened. There were a couple of attempts to do new Supergirls throughout the 90s. Peter David's version is well regarded, but personally, Kara is the character I'm invested in. Someone at DC must have felt similarly, as in 2004 they brought her back with a new origin story that will be more familiar to you, as it is kind of the more standard one now. This was in the Superman Batman book written by Jeff Loeb in the storyline The Supergirl from Krypton. This was later adapted into the direct-to-video animated movie Superman Batman Apocalypse. The storyline led to a new Supergirl series in 2005 with the first arc written by Jeff Loeb. Joe Kelly takes over after Loeb, and frankly, this era of Supergirl is probably some of my least favorite Supergirl. Kelly's first story that was part of the 1 Year Later initiative might be my least favorite Supergirl story. One of my big problems with this era under both of these writers is how overtly sexualized Supergirl is. I don't really have a problem with cheesecake in my comics, but it has to be appropriate to the tone and spirit of the book, and I don't think it is here. Part of that is that Kara is underage. She's 15 or 16, and she's got this very revealing costume, and the artist took seemingly any excuse to get her naked. When I like cheesecake, it tends to be with books that have a flirty and sexy tone. And these stories just aren't that. It's a kid trying to find herself. It just feels icky. After Joe Kelly, Kelly Puckett comes in with some solid work. Part of his short run was kind of ignoring what Kelly had done. With Puckett, I felt like I was reading Kara again. It was her voice, which I felt like was lacking with Loeb and Kelly. He's got a great story in which Kara tries to cure a young boy of cancer. And then there's Sterling Gates. What I really liked about Gates is that he didn't ignore what any of the previous writers had done, but instead chose to retcon certain things and make everything fit together in a nice little bow. Gates really turned this era around. He's clearly an influence on the show as well. The only potential downside of this era is that it was steeped deep in the continuity of the day and what was going on with Superman, namely the new Krypton event, which makes sense but can be a little tough to read in trades. There's constantly major stuff happening off-panel in other books, and it is difficult to read Gates' run in a vacuum. They also never fully released this run in trade, but it is all available digitally. After Gates, Jane Peety came in to write a pretty fun arc called Good Lookin' Corpse that sees Kara team up with Damian Wayne, Blue Beetle, and Miss Martian. Just a self-contained, fun story. This era ends with Kelly Sue DeConnick doing a three-parter that I didn't like very much. Kara was just written weirdly, humorless, and robotic. It was weird and nothing like how she was in the rest of the series. This is a tough series to make a recommendation on because I do think it starts kinda bad, Loeb's stuff is okay, and his arc in the proper Supergirl title loosely inspired the Red Daughter storyline on the show, I think, and that's pretty cool. But it wasn't until Puckett's run that I felt like I was reading Supergirl. And Gates' stuff is really strong, but you do have to be at least aware of what's going on with the super books. Patty's story can be read on its own. It's Supergirl number 60 through 64. So kind of make your own decision based on that if you want to read this era, especially if you liked Kara on Smallville or in the animated movie I mentioned, Apocalypse. During this era, there was also Supergirl and the Legion of Superheroes by Mark Waid. The Legion is a team of superheroes in the 31st century. Kara mysteriously ends up in their time and joins their team. It's a fun series, but not essential for the character. Her mind is erased when she goes back to the present, so it has no effect on her. But it is a solid read. We then move into the New 52. This was a company-wide reboot in 2011. Supergirl's story starts completely over and begins with her pod landing on Earth. A major part of the New 52 is that there was a clear desire to create darker, more adult versions of the characters. As a result, New 52 Kara is quite angry. That is her main character trait, almost to a fault. It can be a little one-note, and she never quite grows out of it. However, I do think this is a really solid series overall. There's a scale to it that I had a lot of fun with. It feels huge at times with some stellar art. Just awesome action throughout. And I do like the focus on how hard Kara's life is. She watched her whole planet, everyone she ever knew, blow up. And of course, this series sees Kara become a Red Lantern, which is iconic and the highlight of the series for me. Such a cool thing. Also notable are two villains. The first is Rain and the Other World Killers, who were adapted on the TV show. And the other is a revamp of Cyborg Superman, who in this continuity is Kara's father, Zor-El. Like Gates' run, the crossovers make it a little frustrating to read and trade, especially because the trades don't tell you what else you need to read or give recap pages, so you kind of have to do that research yourself. Just kind of annoying, but I would recommend this series, especially if you enjoyed the version played by Sasha Calle in The Flash. This series is the clear inspiration for her in that movie. I was rereading this series for this video, and I just naturally read it in Calle's voice. Next came Rebirth, which was not a reboot, but a relaunch. The initiative was meant to get the characters back to a more classic feel without disregarding their New 52 stories. So Rebirth is a continuation of New 52, but with a tone, characterization, and look that is more in line with the TV show. The main connection between New 52 and Rebirth is the Cyborg Superman story, if you wanted to see that continue. There was also a really fun Batgirl team-up story. Some of the TV show elements that got thrown in don't quite work for me, but this is a solid series overall, and it's easy to jump into. Unfortunately, the series was cancelled after issue number 20, as Brian Michael Bendis was coming on to write the Superman books at the time, and there was a desire to restructure the Super family line. One of the main things Bendis added was a new villain, Rogol Zar, who it is revealed destroyed Krypton. So it wasn't a natural disaster. The Supergirl series picked up a few months later, with Kara deciding to go after the organization responsible, as Zar may not have been acting alone. There's some good emotional beats. I like how Kara is written, and there is for sure a lot of value in Kara being a hero across space, not just Earth. You also get to see her fight the Green Lantern Corps, which was pretty cool. Eventually, the series ended up tying into Dark Knight's death metal, which is where it kind of loses me. Overall, a fine run, but not something I would super recommend, though there are some great moments where I do think Mark Andreyko and Jody Houser really do understand the pathos of Kara and how to play it. The series was cancelled in 2020, and I don't think the final couple issues were even printed physically due to COVID. Supergirl has not had an ongoing series since. In 2021, she got a new miniseries under writer Tom King and artist Bilquis Evely, this being Woman of Tomorrow, a standalone space western a la True Grit. This, of course, is being adapted into a film, and it is the best comic ever written in my opinion. It's perfect, 0 notes. If you only read one Supergirl story, this is the one to read. It is absolutely incredible. A really beautiful story that focuses on Kara's trauma without losing her unending kindness and hope. and the art is just gorgeous. Outside of continuity, there are two more things I'd like to mention. If you are a fan of the TV show, there is the Adventures of Supergirl series written by Sterling Gates. This is set within the show's continuity and is very good. There is also Supergirl Being Super. This is a standalone miniseries, again out of continuity, focusing on Kara's origin. It is very good with gorgeous art, and has since been godfathered into DC's young adult graphic novel line, though I prefer the colors of the original Prestige format release. So I hope that helped. I hope that was informative and that you enjoyed watching. If you have any questions or clarifications, please leave those in the comments. Also, let me know what your favorite Supergirl stories are. Thank you for watching.